Imagine this. You're alone, traveling on a night train. The window rattles, and you flinch. In front of you, a reflection. Eyes you don't recognize, staring straight at you like a hitman. A metallic slam, the sound of a door shutting. Then, darkness. When you open your eyes again, you're in a hospital bed. You don't know who you are. Then, slowly, your identity comes back. They ask what you saw, what happened, but you don't know. Of course you don't. Your mind has protected you. Some call it trauma. Others, a true gift from God. Welcome to Indulgo. What you're about to hear is the very first episode of a brand new 20-part miniseries, Neuro-Survival. The brain shutting down to save you like the phoenix in Dr. Sleep, implicit in the ashes that give strength to the demons who breathe them in, or like in Split, where parts of yourself emerge just to keep you alive. And what if I told you that, under certain conditions, you too could access this? Powers you won't find in any manual, but deep in your bones, inside your mind.
Dissociative amnesia. It's not a malfunction. It's a strategy of protection. The mind seals away a memory when the emotional intensity would exceed the threshold of tolerance. It doesn't erase it. The memory exists, but it remains locked away in a vault. In this episode, we'll explore how and why it activates, what happens in the brain on a neurophysiological level, and we'll bring it to life through short yet cinematic reconstructions designed to make you feel that void of memory as if it were your own. Losing the memory doesn't mean losing yourself. On the contrary, sometimes it's exactly what allows us to remain whole while living through a nightmare that, tragically, is real.
On the neurobiological level, dissociative amnesia lies at the crossroads between emotional salience and episodic memory. Emotional salience refers to how strongly a stimulus, an event, a word, an image, or a situation captures our attention and triggers an intense emotional response. It's the reason why we remember an insult more vividly than a generic compliment, or a sudden danger more sharply than a neutral detail. Episodic memory, on the other hand, concerns the recall of autobiographical events, personal experiences clearly situated in time and space. Here's the sequence in brief. An alarm goes off in the mind. Memory is active but under pressure, and consciousness loses control. Let's break it down in more detail.
Alarm. When we perceive an extreme threat, our brain's emotional control center, the amygdala, goes into hyperactivity. From there, a chain reaction is triggered through the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis. The result? A flood of stress hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol rushing through the body. Memory under pressure. The problem is that the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for transforming an event into a lasting memory, is highly sensitive to these hormones. If stress levels peak, the system jams. Episodic memory fails to consolidate properly. That's why, especially in traumatic situations, memories become confused, fragmented, or even absent. 12. The director loses control. The prefrontal cortex, which normally conducts the orchestra guiding decisions, organizing thoughts, and inhibiting automatic responses, loses precision under extreme stress. The brain stops reasoning calmly and shifts into automatic survival mode, relying on reflexes and instinctive actions. The outcome? The body does everything it can to protect the self, even if that means sacrificing the central film of the event. Instead of a clear, linear memory, what often remains are sensory fragments. A smell, a pressure, a temperature, a tiny detail, and procedural memories, automatic actions carried out without conscious awareness. What's missing is the coherent, conscious sequence of the episode. In cases of dissociative fugue, even one's very sense of identity can be suspended, sometimes leading to sudden geographic wandering.
This mechanism protects in the short term. The price: narrative gaps, voids that may later be filled or may remain sealed forever.
Rainy morning. The man sits at the counter, fingers wrapped around a cup. Everyone knows him, an honest man, often alone, burdened with debts, yet peaceful. Another man walks in. A dark jacket, raindrops sliding off like pearls, a sharp smell of gasoline trailing behind. He orders him to hand over the money and keep quiet. The aggressor holds a weapon, ready to use it. The man has nothing. He doesn't know what to do. The teaspoon starts to rattle with an uneven rhythm. His eyes dart, searching for anchors, while blood surges to his head in a wave of panic. The reflection on the metal, the line of the tiles, the shiny edge of a bottle. His heart leaps into his throat. His shoulders twitch, almost imperceptibly. And then, the trembling begins. The man's hand slips, a metallic flash less than a meter away. Now the snapshot should form, the one he'll recount to the police tomorrow. But the film tears. The amygdala fires. The hippocampus fails to record the critical frame. The prefrontal cortex loses its fine control. What remains? The steam brushing his chin, the stinging smell of gasoline burning his throat, raindrops on the shop window. What vanishes? The gesture, the face, the trajectory. Inside his head, only sounds remain. A footstep, a paper bag falling, a strangled cry. He fixes his gaze on a tiny dark stain on the counter, anchors himself to it. It looks like blood. It must be blood. And yet he feels fine. Maybe he's already in heaven. At the police station, he describes hands, fabric, scent, even the neon's reflection on a button. But when asked about the face, the sequence, the tape cuts, he cannot explain what he did. He only knows he was the victim, not the aggressor. Dissociative amnesia acts like a protective cut in the film. The sensory fragments remain. The narrative is gone. His mind gave him the strength to react, then erased the memory of what he had done too brutal to accept.
A blast like thunder that never ends shatters the monotony of the evening. The air suddenly changes scent. Lime, dust, a metallic veil on the tongue. The lights flicker. She and her husband lock eyes as long shadows scatter across the walls. A hand grabs her wrist, warmth alive against sudden cold. The rough fabric of a shirt brushes her skin. In an instant, her body reduces the world to simple trajectories. Where to place her foot, how to avoid the falling frame, the door, the staircase, the descent, who leads, who follows.
Time skips. The hippocampus fails to build the sequence. The prefrontal cortex yields to autopilot. What remains are fragments. Grit under her soles. A tear of fabric. A panting breath at her ear. The collapse of the building does not exist in her conscious memory. Now she is outside, and it is night. A thermal blanket, blue lights, a warm cup between her ice-cold hands. She sees everyone moving behind glass. The grip on her wrist left warmth more than pain. She clings to that sensation, realizing she is still alive. The rest is completely abstract. To the rescuers, she reports a blast, the smell of dust, a hand, then outside. Neighbors swear she led others down the stairs, knocked on a door, lifted several children. She has no memory of it. They ask where her husband is, but she does not answer. That woman is living dissociation as a seatbelt. It obscures the traumatic peak, but leaves procedural skills intact. You can act well and not remember. You are not broken. It is not contradiction. It is optimization for survival.
The neon light doesn't illuminate, it punishes. It hangs there buzzing, a white line vibrating in the air, too weak to give warmth, yet too strong to ignore. The chair is metal. My skin sticks to it, alternating between freezing and burning, as if my body no longer knows the difference. But I know this much. This is not wood. Footsteps echo down the corridor. They draw closer, steady, neither rushing nor hesitating, measuring out the time I have left. Each step, a silent countdown. There, a shadow appears to my left. No, it doesn't seek my face. My eyes drift elsewhere toward a scratch on the metal, thin yet precise, as if that mark were somehow more important. Then, a touch. Something soft brushes against my triceps. Not a caress, not a threat, just a signal. The voice follows, low and cavernous. I can't make out the words. What stays with me is the timbre branded deeper than any phrase.
Here, this is the moment when memory splits. The body stores the details, sound, cold, touch, while consciousness withdraws. The prisoner knows he will remain locked away, so the only way to survive is to forget instantly and repeat that forgetting every time. Here, the protocol takes shape and time bends. Hours, days, months pass so quickly that when release finally comes, he will no longer be the same person. It becomes a collection of moments in which you are no longer a spectator, but a prisoner of your own memory. Time erases itself. Each time, consciousness goes offline. The amygdala stays on alert. The hippocampus refuses to capture. The prefrontal cortex abdicates narration. What remains are fragments. A buzz, cycles of a distant song, a fleeting brush of fabric, the sickly sweet scent of disinfectant. Return to light, shoulders opening, legs regaining elasticity. Red marks on the wrists, temporary bracelets. In his pocket, a slip of paper with an hour written on it, proof of a time lived but not possessed. Dissociation is our functional bunker. You cannot recount those minutes, but you are here after those minutes. The void is the price, the continuity of the self, the gain. In all these scenes, the cut falls at the very peak of the event. It isn't a flaw, it's protective direction. The central nervous system preserves integrity and function by sacrificing the conscious memory of the most devastating moment. Sometimes fragments return with safety, time, guidance. Sometimes they don't, and that's fine. The goal is not to reopen the vault at all costs, but to live whole despite the missing frame, because neuro-survival is the human strategy of continuity. And now comes the striking thought. What if one day we discovered we could bend this force to our will? What if the art of forgetting were no longer a desperate reflex, but a conscious choice? Science is already glimpsing possibilities. Techniques that modulate memory, that soften the weight of the harshest images. It's not yet absolute silence, not perfect oblivion, but some among us may already be capable of it. Perhaps you are one of those who could actively decide which memories leave scars and which fade into mere dust in the background. Maybe the real power is not remembering everything, but choosing, voluntarily, what to forget. And if you were truly the one to wield this power, remember, no one could ever certify what you have forgotten. Your own brain would disavow every trace of your actions. Pure Mission Impossible style.
This is Indulgo, the doorway to your mind. Shall we cross the threshold together?